Great. So this is the July 26, 2021 meeting with the Hillside Halo Group, as well as the community councils and the Rabbit Creek Community Council Resilience Committee. And tonight we have a couple of primary areas to focus in on. One is the event being planned for this Friday and Saturday with Team Rubicon on doing some treatment, as well as a community event on Saturday around wildfire and Firewise awareness. And the second is to spend some time with Jen Schmidt, a researcher with University of Alaska, looking at the work that she's been doing on mapping the fuel loads and potentially some of the hazard mapping that may be available to us. We'll also, time allowing, look for some updates on other Firewise programming and other activities going on that people would like to report on. And we'll start off with just a brief introduction running around the table here of who's here and what groups you're with. And if you have anything specific that you'd like added to the agenda, early or late, let me know and I'll try and add it on as we go. And so if you wouldn't mind, we'll start off with just the order that I have folks here on, which, move my little window around, looks like is going to be David and then Jen.
I'm David Michael. I live up on Snowflake near Bear Valley School, and I'm a member of the Rabbit Creek Community Council.
Great, thanks, Jen, and then John C.
My name is Jen Schmidt.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
My name is Jen Schmidt. I work at UAA, as Kai said. I'm doing some wildfire research.
Great, go ahead, John, and then followed by John will be Camilla.
I'm John C. Volunteer status. Glad to be here.
Good to hear. Camilla, and then looks like Dirk.
Thanks, Kai. This is Carmela Warfield. I am co-president of the Hillside Community Council and board member of HALO.
And Dirk, go ahead. Dirk, are you in there? If not, we'll go to Dwayne.
I'm Dwayne Polsusiam, West Branch planner for Team Rubicon, based in a very dark Denver, Colorado, compared to you guys in sunny Alaska.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Dwayne. Let's see, I've got John C. again in here. It looks like Katie and then Keith Geyer. Katie?
Hi, Katie Nolan, Halo.
Keith?
Hi, this is Keith Geyer with Rabbit Creek Community Council.
And my order is kind of getting messed up now. It looks like Rachel and then Representative Kaufman.
Hi, Rachel Alford with Team Rubicon. I am an admin lead for Alaska and Northern Washington.
Great. And Representative Kaufman.
Hi, Representative Kaufman here. My wife Nancy, who's on the board of HALO as well. So we're tag teaming it on my PC tonight.
Excellent. Good to see you both, or have you both on here. It looks to me like I've got everyone, but maybe I haven't. The order juggled around. Have I missed anyone that's on the phone with us tonight or on Zoom? Excuse me.
Sorry, this is Dirk, Senator Reback's office. I had to switch to my Wi-Fi audio, so I'm here.
Excellent. Thanks for jumping back on with us. Okay, last call. Any other changes on the agenda? Otherwise, we're going to start with the discussion about the event on this coming weekend, and then we'll jump to the UAA work that Jen is doing. Any other discussion on the agenda? All right, let's go ahead then and jump into the discussion about the event on Saturday. I'm going to share my screen briefly and then kind of turn it over to Katie and Rachel here. You should see the flyer material that's I think some version that we've put out here. The main event currently, for folks who aren't familiar, is planned for 11 to 3 p.m. on Saturday, July 31st at the Trinity Presbyterian Church. That's at Lorraine and Huffman. And we currently have planned a series of seminars and information related to Firewise and work that people can do to assess and treat their homes. In and around this is also a series of activities with Team Rubicon, I believe, doing some work on Friday, both at this site and maybe also a site on Elmore, and potentially some volunteer opportunities for assistance in that training work that Team Rubicon is doing, as well as some assistance needed in setup for the event on Saturday. So Katie and or Rachel, would you like to kind of pick it up from there in terms of what planning is done, needs to be done, any loose ends that we need to be aware of?
Well, why don't we let Rachel start out with her end of it?
Sure. So I'll take what we're doing and then give it over to Katie for the loose ends and where we want some extra volunteers specifically. So due to the nature of where this is and being along a street and the church property being used, our current plan is to have a couple of our lead sawyers there on Thursday to fell and drop the trees that have been marked ahead of the event. And then we will be using, the church has offered use of one of their rooms and Wi-Fi and everything for one of our classes. We'll be conducting a chainsaw operations class for some of our volunteers who haven't done that yet over Friday and Saturday. Friday morning, that will consist of a good chunk of the day. Friday will consist of the classroom stuff. Friday afternoon, start learning how to cut and doing the demonstrations. And then Saturday, they will be working all day under supervision and instruction. So we'll actually be completing the work necessary for this project with our students. We currently have 8 students in the class. We also have an additional sawyers coming out to help with that over the weekend. So we have no doubts that we'll be able to complete the work on the timeline needed with doing the class with it. The Saturday event, I actually brought in an extra instructor as well so that I don't have to worry as much about the class and all the overarching events along with Katie and that community event. Scheduled a couple of well and been asked about doing some demonstrating of like basic maintenance, chain sharpening, stuff like that. And then Sunday, because we have the properties we're looking at doing right now, the work will be completed on Saturday with our sawyers and the help of some volunteers from Halo, I believe, clearing the brush, stacking stuff as well. I'll have some spontaneous volunteer waivers for those helping with that, since they will be working around us and our equipment. So be bringing, hard hats, gloves, things like that for any of those volunteers, and some Team Rubicon spontaneous volunteer shirts, which Katie was really excited about. And then depending on how all of that goes, wanting to make sure that we could stop if we needed to, give time to the community event, etc., weren't in the way. We will either we will complete the church on Saturday and we'll hopefully get started on the second property that's by the rabbit area. Depending on how fast that goes, you never know with students, we may complete the majority, if not all of the work on Saturday and won't need Sunday. But we do have Sunday scheduled to either do all of that second home or continue and finish up the work. Sure, we leave everything nice. Between John C. and Katie with Halo, they're working on coordinating one of the tree companies to come in afterwards and skip all of the brush and woody debris that cannot be used for firewood. The rest of the trees we will be bucking into firewood yet found of those in the congregation who need it to come up later. And that mostly covers what will we do with that. Katie, did I miss anything? All right, and over to you for any of the, oh, and we will be doing a couple, John and Katie both have been working on, there will be a couple of interviews, both radio and the media. We've had several requests. We'll likely be putting stuff out. So we're hoping that will help with turnout for the community education event as well.
Awesome. All right, on my end of it, we still need helpers. I'd really like to know who all's going to come that I can count on to help. I need from the community councils, I'd like each one of them to have one designated person there available to hand out membership forms, information about your community councils. We're getting people in and I'd like some way to do info capture on them. So I'm gonna try to set up a table right at the entrance where we can give people a little schedule of the day and get them information, but I'd like to also get them signed up and on our mailing lists. So for your councils, please let me know if you've got somebody that can do that. The rest of the day, we're going to have the fire department's going to be there. We're going to need help with parking and making sure people park in the school parking lot, the school of Huffman Elementary. They can't park on Lorraine Street. We're going to use that for AFD's parking. So if they have to leave, they can. And I need help getting the word out. We've sent it to all the email lists, but I really need people to make copies and hand them to their neighbors or get an email copy and forward it to the rest of your list so we can get the word out about this, because the more people we can get them thinking about the mindset of their property and taking care of their property, the better off we're going to be in the long run. John, you want to chime in and say where we're at?
It looks like he might have stepped away, Katie. His camera's
Mute up a
playing.
sec. John, you're muted if you can hear
Oh,
us.
there he is.
I know we've
There we
got
go.
There, perfect.
I'm sorry. I had trouble getting unmuted here. Let's see. I talked to all the tree service folks except one today, and they're all excited about the opportunity to participate. I got a firm commitment from Tall Trees to help do the grinding, the cleanup work. And I'm telling him probably starting Monday, what they would like to do is kind of work it between jobs where they finish something, they can send a crew over there, maybe grind for an hour. And I said that'll be great. And then depending on these alternate sites, we may line up other tree service companies to maybe help us on those. Let's see. I did finally reach JR, Katie, and
Oh, good.
sounds like he has some questions that I said, and we're set up for 10:30 tomorrow morning
Okay.
to do a walkthrough and make sure the trees are flagged correctly. There was a little bit of discussion about what was going to happen with the trees that are removed, and he has some ideas which we'll talk about tomorrow.
Okay.
Let's see, I mentioned to you, I tried to get a hold of the UAA groundskeeper and left a message for her regarding the possibility of doing some work for UAA in the form of beetle tree removal. She should be returning by the end of the week. And if there is an opportunity there, I'll know more as the week progresses here.
Awesome. I think at this point, we need to let everybody know that the idea is that the new sawyers would appreciate having an opportunity to practice their new skills. And the more places we can find that they can get onto and treat, the better off we all are going to be.
And let's see, I talked with Chris this morning, Rachel, and about making sure the barricades are up. And I talked to JR about this. We want those barricades in place Wednesday evening late. So when they arrive Thursday, they can go right to work and they won't have to worry about trying to shoo somebody out of there that's parked in the church parking lot. So that's going to be important to make sure that happens. Also, there's some media interest in getting some video of the trees being dropped, which will be a great segue to the public participation on Saturday, because that should show up Thursday night or Friday sometime, and it'll be great to attract the public to our event on Saturday. My concern is we need to be sure we have a PIO on duty there to meet the media folks, keep them out of harm's way with the sawing that's going on. So I guess I can talk to Rachel about that, and Katie will talk about it tomorrow as well.
Yeah, I've already talked to Chris about like when it would work and where they could safely get the footage they'd need. So anybody who does want that will have to coordinate through me. We don't want them just showing up anytime on Thursday. Additionally, we could be at the second site when they show up. So if somebody doesn't reach out to me directly, but reaches to you, if you can direct them to me for scheduling that, if that's what they want. On Saturday, you know, if they want to come out anytime during the event, that's absolutely fine. But specifically for the felling, we did scope out like where that would work and when that would work. And I do want to caveat, Katie and John, thank you for your diligence and like looking for additional sites for us to work and training on. We do, just to manage expectations, we do have a very limited number of leads up here that can run those events. And some of us are already committed to other operations and things going on for later in the summer. So I don't know how, like, we love to have those and have those contacts and you know, work towards it, but I can't make any promises about what else we can actually accomplish outside of this year. We already have another mitigation op we're committed to beginning of August. And I'm also on our international medical team and looking at a couple deployments with that. And I'm one of the states. So just to level set those expectations as you guys are talking to people and reaching out for anyone on this call. We really appreciate it. We want to build our that is working at growing, and want to make sure we don't leave people disappointed if they're thinking we can get a ton of work done this year.
Got it. The other thing I wanted to mention is that Representative Kaufman has been, hopefully has a Facebook and Nextdoor type blurb that we can send out that we'll need everybody to work out. Rep Kaufman, can you just an update?
Yeah, present. Yeah, well, we're going to take the flyer and we'll push it out using the email list that we have for our newsletters. So we'll get that out. Matthew is working up a little graphic that'll be appropriate for Facebook. We hadn't done that yet because our critical need for that in our mind was a little bit later in the week to get it out, say, you know, Wednesday, Thursday-ish, to get it circulating via Facebook. But we can accelerate that and probably get that sent over probably in the morning. And then also once I get that, I'll push it out on Nextdoor, just using my account and with distribution to the general hillside, South Anchorage. Any questions?
Hey, this is Dirk in Senator Revac's office. I was just wondering if it's okay if we share that graphic you guys emailed. I know there was a little graphic that I think Kai sent or somebody, if we could just send that out in one of our blasts as well.
Yeah, Kai sent the poster, but we were just going to do something a little tighter with less text for Facebook, and we're going to share that, of course.
Okay, and if that's okay, we might just take that, what Matthew's worked on, and borrow it from you guys.
Sure.
Okay, so Rachel, Katie, John, any other loose ends at this point that you'd like to go over in terms of the agenda for the activities that are happening? And is AFD all lined up in terms of their portion of the actual activities starting at 11?
Unmute. AFD is going to have their brush rig up there all afternoon. They're going to go back and forth between Station 8 and Station 9, depending on call out, but they'll always have a truck there. They also ask for a table so that they can have information out for the community. I also am going to let the kids crawl on their fire trucks, obviously. And I think the big thing we need help with is just help, warm bodies to help us direct traffic and get people into the different things that are happening from 11 to 3. And if anybody's interested in joining Team Rubicon, listening to their briefing in the morning at 8 a.m., that's when they'll be starting work.
Okay, so who's on and committed to doing the AFD Firewise program presentation?
John, say hi.
I think we have Tom with the he's coordinating the battalion chief that took over the wildland program. He's lining up the brush one, I believe, and then he's gonna, I think, cycle a couple of captains through there through the afternoon.
Right, but it's in the seminar demonstration display stuff, the list, we had somebody actually talking about the Firewise program. Is there somebody lined up and committed to actually stand up and do that?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I was not coordinating that part of the program.
Who's got the ball on that?
I do, and yes, that's what they told me they do. Also, John's going to teach us a mini seminar about how to do it yourself home Firewise. So from the list that we used for this last seminar that we did.
That's right. We'll be handing out the Firewise brochures and doing kind of a walkthrough of a do-it-yourself home inspection.
Okay. So then Team Rubicon is straightforward. The chainsaw techniques, care and maintenance, is that a Team Rubicon discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
It is.
And then the
That's
home
just going to
evacuation
be.
preparation. Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, it is. But that's just going to be like, that's not going to be demonstrated to the public actively cutting or like techniques for using the chainsaw as so much as techniques for like care, maintenance, sharpening the chain, stuff like that. Just for safety reasons.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And then who's doing the home evacuation preparation?
AFD has that one, and I've also passed on Team Rubicon's Go Kit list.
Gotcha. Okay, good. All right, it sounds like we're kind of covered there. Who's actually going to be running the show starting at 11 o'clock? In terms of who's keeping the flow of things moving.
That's why I need volunteers. We're all going to work on that.
Well, volunteers can do a lot of things. Somebody needs to run the show. Who's in charge?
Oh, I'm the ringmaster.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, sounds like we're good there. All right, and so as far as Rabbit Creek, I guess I'm looking, I'll certainly be there for Rabbit Creek. Keith and David, are you guys going to be there, and you guys help with the Rabbit Creek side of this stuff that Katie's asked for help with?
Yes, we do have out-of-town company, but we're planning to be there for the probably 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning until closing at least.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I'm available Friday and Saturday, so.
Okay, perfect, thanks. Carmela, are you guys okay from the hillside?
I'm
area?
working on, I'm working on volunteers for that and working to clear my schedule so I can be there, and I will get back to you and Katie this week.
Okay, sounds great. Good. Anybody have any other loose ends, concerns, or questions about what's happening, when it's happening, and who needs to do what then?
I have a question for Katie. So if you're the ringmaster, when do you want the clowns to actually show up to
Before
start?
11 a.m.
So we want to say like 10:30, meet at the gathering area and start to get lined out?
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
let's just run it that way, and we'll be there about 10:30 to get going, unless you need us anywhere else before that.
Great.
All right, any other?
If I can
Yeah,
add
go.
to that, if for volunteers that are wanting to actually like put on a hard hat and help move the brush, stack the firewood with us, they are welcome to come as early as 8, like Katie said, with our morning brief from then on. I think 10:30 is for the ones that are going to be help setting up and managing the rest of that area as well. As you talk to people, if you want to just let them know that they're welcome to start earlier if they're wanting to actually do physical manual labor with us.
Excellent. And am I correct at this point that there are no community volunteers needed Thursday or Friday? Is that correct?
That is
Okay.
correct.
And there's maybe a need for some help on Sunday, but that's just up in the air right now. Really, the key time is to show up at 8 a.m. on Saturday to help with cleaning up brush and other stuff in the field, right?
Yes. Wear appropriate clothing, closed-toed shoes, gloves.
Okay, perfect. All right. Anybody else have any final questions or suggestions? Going once, going twice?
Hi. The RCCC PA. Public address.
Interesting question. Katie, do you have or need a PA system for the presentations on Saturday and want the Rabbit Creek folks to bring their system?
Yes, I didn't know you had one. Yes, it would be awesome. Instead of trying to yell.
David, sounds like you got the sale.
I'm
Thank
stuck.
you.
Yeah, it's a nice system that David and his family, I forget all who's involved, but they helped the Rabbit Creek Community Council get set up with an electronic system so that we can do a better job of engaging everybody at our meetings, and
Awesome.
yeah, real asset to our meetings, and so it's great that he can bring that along. It's a nice system. You know, even
Thank
play some
you.
music out of it if we want to get the beat going, right? Okay. All right. Anything else? Last call on this subject. Okay. Thank you so much for everyone who's doing the work to organize all of the bits and pieces of this, as well as just a final reminder also on all of us doing what we can to help promote this event and encourage the community across the whole hillside to attend this on Saturday and take advantage of all the hard work that's gone into organizing this. Now we're going to shift gears now and move from kind of the current awareness activities to a broader, longer term project that Jen Schmidt from UAA and her work at ICER have been doing to research the hazard mapping and the data that we might use to both understand the current situation, but to understand how it's changing over time. So Jen, I'm going to set you up so that you can share your screen, which I'm assuming you're going to want to.
Okay.
And turn it over to you to kind of tee it up the way you'd like to in terms of what you'd like to cover with the slides and material that I know you'd like to share.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, thank you. Let's see. I think screen 2 is what I'll do here. And Everyone can hear me okay? And can you see the presentation now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I'm just going to talk about some work that I've been doing the last couple of years to try to map wildfire hazards in the Anchorage area, but I'm also doing this in Fairbanks and Whitehorse. And it's hard for me to see the chat. So if someone wants to let me know if there's a question in the chat or just, comment while I'm talking, that's fine. We can stop. I can take questions anytime. So this is part of this Arctic Urban Risks and Adaptation Project that was funded by NSF a couple of years ago. And the project actually looks at wildfire, permafrost thaw, and rain and winter events. I'm going to focus on the wildfire component today. And so to do this, we had to look at a little bit of background as far as what has the climate been doing in the Anchorage area. And this just kind of shows what temperature and precip have been doing and are projected to do during the summer here in Anchorage, since temperature and precipitation are important for, wildfire, BUIs, fuel buildup. In Anchorage, temperatures have been getting a little bit warmer and in the future predicted to get slightly warmer. Precipitation also has been slightly increasing in the future. It's about level, so not much change going into the future for the summer time. And then, like I mentioned, another piece of background as far as climate weather goes is BUI, so this buildup index, which is primarily driven by temperature, relative humidity, and rain. The BUI is important and correlated with wildfire activity, like when there was a Swan Lake fire back in 2019, the BUI values were off the charts. Things were just burning. And so we looked at some modeling of the future, and this shows kind of the percent change of BUI from average. So what this graph is showing is that in the red lines here, those are predictions going further out into the future. So 2050, 2060. And what you'll notice is the red lines are higher from average than the blue lines, which are more towards now. And so what this graph is showing for the Anchorage area, we're expected to see higher BUI values in the spring and in the fall. Another model that we ran for the Anchorage area shows higher values in the spring, not so much higher in the fall. So if I was planning on when I might want to shift my attention for looking at potential wildfires, the spring looks like it's going to be the time when things are going to get more flammable and potential for more wildfires earlier in the spring in Anchorage. And so to do my wildfire hazard mapping, I needed to use vegetation. The vegetation represents the amount of fuels that are available. We all know spruce is highly flammable. Green, wet deciduous, not as flammable. And so in order to look at wildfire hazards over time, because I wanted to look at the wildfire hazard from 1980 going forward, I used this vegetation map produced by NASA. It's based on Landsat, so remote sensed information. It's annual data from 1984 to 2014. So we have 31 years of data. The resolution, so the pixel size, is 30 meters, which is a little bit coarse. Finer data would be better, but 30 meters, it covers a large area. So we use this to look at fuels and vegetation and how they change over time. So this is an example of the Anchorage area and the vegetation map. And you'll see the different vegetation classes here: deciduous, evergreen, we broke it up into black spruce and other, fen, herbaceous, low shrub, tall shrub, mixed forest. You'll see the gray is mostly urban, or the gray can also be the tops of mountains. So there's not an urban component to this. It doesn't tell us where people live, but you'll see these dark green patches here, which are spruce, usually associated with higher flammability. This vegetation map, we have vegetation maps for 2014, but also 2004, 1994, and 1984. And this map kind of drives the wildfire hazard. So there are two different ways to look at wildfire hazards. One common way is Flam Map, and I know John C. is very familiar with Flam Map. and that produces burn probabilities and flame links. One issue with that approach is there's kind of random ignitions that are started on the landscape to cause fires, to burn, to give you the burn probabilities. That makes comparisons from decade to decade and changes a little bit more difficult because you can have, fires starting at different areas based on that random simulation. So I have ran Flam Map, but for here and for planning from a community perspective, I'm going to focus on this exposure method, which has been done by people in Canada and is more comparable to year. It's more understandable than some of the really small burn probabilities that you can get from Flam Map. And so what this exposure method does is, say this is your house here in the center or a school. What it does is it looks in 100-meter radius here, and it looks at the type of vegetation that is within this 100-meter radius, or in this case, a 500-meter radius. So these are the two I focus on, a 100-meter radius and a 500-meter radius. And you want to look at the vegetation around that and how flammable is the vegetation around in this buffer, in this circle. And we don't do the 30-meter one because our cell size is 30 meters. We don't have fine enough data to do that. Hopefully the Muni will get some with the earthquake money and some other funds that they have. But for us, it's 100 and 500. And the 100 represents short range spotting, and the 500 represents longer range spotting. So lots of houses, embers catch houses on fire. That's the primary way that houses burn, is these embers. And so the 500-meter represents the long range spotting from wildfires. For planning, the 100-meter would be good for the Rabbit Creek area, whereas 500-meter, I'd suggest, for the MOA level. And so, as I mentioned, our vegetation kind of drives our wildfire exposure. And so for each of the different types of vegetation, we assign kind of how much fuel there is or how flammable it is. And you'll see that the evergreen gets 100, so it's the most flammable. So if I had a score of 100, within my search radius, that means it contains highly flammable materials. Woodland was really flammable. Black spruce is very flammable. So the higher values you're going to see in the maps that I'm going to show you mean more flammable material. And so this 100 was the shorter range spotting, and the 500 is longer range. You see that the values kind of go down with the 500-meter range because the fire's further away, the embers are traveling a bit further. That deciduous might not be as flammable as if the fire was a short range spotting and the embers are closer and landing on the deciduous. That's why you have these smaller values here for the 500-meter resolution that I'm going to show you. So hopefully that's clear to people. I don't see any questions or anything. And so here's an example of using that method at the 500-meter resolution. So within a 500-meter radius, looking at what is my wildfire exposure value, so that vegetation fuel value in 1984. The red colors indicate higher wildfire exposure, so more, say, spruce in these areas where you're seeing red. So this is 1984. This is 2014. So you can toggle back and forth and kind of see some changes here. I think that the vegetation mapping over emphasizes hemlock and how flammable that is. So girdwood has some problems, but you can see 1984, 2014, and then you can see the change. So what I did is I took 2014 and subtracted what the flammability or the exposure was in 1984. And you'll see the Rabbit Creek area actually has had a decrease at this scale in wildfire exposure or wildfire hazard, but it's slightly increased, say over by the Sand Lake area, kind of where I live over here. And I'll show you later, I think what's going on with that is the Rabbit Creek area has really developed since the 80s, whereas this part of Anchorage has been developed and trees have grown up. I know I have a giant spruce tree in my yard, which I'm sure has gotten taller since 1980. And so it's picked up more by the satellites. But with these maps, we can look and see how wildfire hazard or exposure is changing over time. So if we zoom into the Rabbit Creek area, and I wanted to do this with you guys because I feel more comfortable with you guys, and I'm really looking for feedback as to how this data could be used or how useful it is and whether the scale is appropriate for it. So we zoomed into the Rabbit Creek area, and you can see this is what the wildfire hazard looked like in 1984. This is long range spotting, and you'll see this area I have circled here. Well, this is what it looks like in 1984, and this is what it looks like in 2014. So I had a student go and digitize what Anchorage looked like in 1984, and you'll see this gray is all recent development since 1984. So development really came in here and reduced the wildfire exposure score or wildfire hazard. So this again is zooming in on the map showing the change, and you'll see the change from 2004 versus what it was in 1984, a definite decrease in these areas in your wildfire exposure. And so here's another view at it, looking at the 100-meter resolution. So more fine scale, short range spotting. This might be better for trying to maybe plan fuel treatments or look at egress, ingress roads. And you'll see there's a lot more red here. This is 1984. And this is again 2014. You still see the same, development, tampering down that wildfire exposure. But when we look, more closely, you can see that there are some areas here with quite high wildfire exposure or wildfire hazard that potentially could be looked at. Yeah, so that's an example of looking at the 100-meter resolution. And this again looks at the change. So we can see change decreasing, but you do have these pockets where wildfire exposure or hazard has increased over time, which might, be places where you look at to try to do some thinning or some work there. And this just kind of shows how the vegetation really captures the changes, and that's kind of driving what we're seeing in our wildfire exposure or hazard. You can see in the 80s, a lot of spruce was in this area, and in 2014, it's changed more to kind of open shrubs. People prefer that maybe in their lawns. And so I also wanted to look at and see, well, how does the Rabbit Creek area compare to, let's say, Hillside or Basher? And, Rabbit Creek is about in the middle. So this looks at the overall wildfire exposure at the 500-meter level in 2014. So the place with the highest wildfire exposure or hazard, South Fork, Basher, and Hillside. They've declined a little bit over time. So since 1984, it's gone down by 2%, 3%, 5%. But those are your highest kind of wildfire exposure areas. Rabbit Creek is right about 35, but it has gone down by about 12%, I think, due to the development in the area. So, just kind of comparing, if we're looking at the muni and trying to figure out where to put efforts, this might help with that. And so, where do we go from here? I was thinking that maybe community councils can use this for planning development, keeping in mind, wildfire exposure, what development does to it, where is it high, identify areas within the community councils to target for Firewise efforts and thinning. You're probably not going to be able to clear out, a whole area of spruce, but if you can get the houses around it to do Firewise, then it's a good chance, we could save houses. Identify egress, ingress routes that go through high exposure areas for treatment, potentially identify areas for fuel treatments. And then I'm going to create these maps going out to 2040 or 2054 to try to look at how wildfire hazard might change in the future in the Anchorage area. So I can just kind of maybe go back to one of these maps and then just open it up for comments or discussion.
Great,
Wow,
Jen.
wow, wow. Jen is fabulous. And I know John Wilson, you here someplace, right? I would love all of our elected officials to see this, especially our hillside people. And I'm so glad we have a couple of our Juneau people here.
I am here, and this is amazing.
Thank you.
Jen, this is Kai. I'm wondering, with what I perceive as a fairly dramatic and rapid infestation from the spruce bark beetles, if we would expect to see that anything has changed significantly, at least in a relative sense, in the last 3 or 4 years, if we were to think about what the 2024 map is going to be? Or do you feel like that the map and the exposure levels from a relative sense capture what's happening with the spruce bark beetle and the increased danger that those dead trees now represent? Is that a factor, or is it already factored in, at least in a relative sense, to our understanding of where the risks are and the relative importance of the risk in different areas?
Mhm. Well, with the method, that NASA used and the method that we used, basically the two spruces, white spruce, black spruce, are treated the same. And, we know that beetles, tend to infest the white spruce more than the black spruce, although in really high years, they're going for both. And I guess it's whether you believe that, spruce trees that have been killed by beetles, does their flammability really change from live spruce trees? If you're under the belief that it doesn't change very much, then probably the maps won't change all that much, because at least in the Anchorage area, succession happens very slowly. And spruce trees will probably stay spruce trees for a while in our future vegetation maps. In the Fairbanks area, there's lots of wildfire, and that can really wipe out patches of spruce. But like I said, we don't have that here. So if you're kind of thinking that the flammability is the same, dead or alive, then probably not a whole lot of changes unless there's large scale removal of these spruce trees. Then there'll be some changes. But I kind of think that the maps will still be valid. These were flown by NASA, and I don't have I don't have the capacity of NASA to update these with live data going forward. But we could overlay something if the Muni did have some mapping effort and identified where this spruce beetle has hit. We could do some type of correction factor. One of the things I like about this approach, and I'm using it with DNR, is it's fast and it's quick. It doesn't take a whole lot of computer resources that FlamMap tends to take, a whole lot of investment and really, really specialized trained people to run. This, I can set it up and I can run it, and in 5 minutes it's done. So if you want to tweak things, if you want to do like adaptive management, it's really easy to play with.
That's great. And I'm assuming that because you have 84, 94, 2004, that you're able, and we could test this against the infestation we had in the 90s, because there is a peak period that happened in the 80s, 90s in there that you've captured. So that's good enough there. The other thing I wanted to generally ask about, you touched on it briefly, but what are your thoughts on how we could use this to help with addressing some of the road connectivity, access, egress type of issues? Are there layers where some of the roads could be assessed, and what would be needed to be able to figure out what our hazard levels might be along key routes, like Rabbit Creek Road, as you and I chatted? That's a pretty significant road. If we were to lose that road due to being compromised from a fire, we'd have a big problem, because there isn't any other way to get on or off the hillside in the south area. How could we use this tool to look at that question in this area and others across the hillside?
Oh, well, the data is at a 30-meter resolution and kind of then, scaled up to 100-meter resolution. So, being able to say this is what it looks like right along the Rabbit Creek Road or any of these roads, I think is past the ability of what this data can do. However, it could identify areas to kind of maybe go out and look at and see what's going on. Like, here Rabbit Creek is a major road. So, there's a high red spot here, there's red spots here, but more importantly, we look at, say, out here, this road, if, there are buildings out here, residents out here, they got to go through a pretty flammable area to try to get out. Even the people who live, have to come down out of here and go down this road. This looks like a major hot spot that the road is passing through. So you could look at the roads and see where people have to go through, where there's areas of high exposure. If I had a student, probably what I would do with a student is, work with the residents to identify what are the primary areas, because there's a lot going on this map. There's a lot of roads. So just strip it out to what are the main egress routes, and then kind of work with the student to assign, okay, all of these houses, let's say in this gray patch, got to go onto Rabbit Creek area here. So we could kind of cluster the different roads with which egress routes that they go down. And then we could better identify where people are going to be heading and combine this with exposure to try to make those routes safer. Also, it might be worth trying to put in other ways to get out, in some of these areas too, that really do just bottleneck down.
Mhm.
The other thing I might use this for is, I see a lot of, houses and development here that really abut against areas with high wildfire exposure. So maybe it would be wise to put a larger fuel treatment that runs along the side of this to protect the houses that are in this area. In the FLAM map, we do look at wind directions. So I'd probably have to pull up the wind directions to figure out, okay, is our high areas where wildfires typically get ignited, does the wind come from the south or does it come from the north? Because that'll play in probably where you would want to put in your fuel treatments. But, I'd recommend working with someone like John or, the Anchorage Fire Department to best place these with this information helping.
Jen, one of the things that I would like to see come out of your research here is a recommendation to get back to the community wildfire protection planning process. And I think doing all of Anchorage in one broad brush is maybe a little too difficult. We need to break the hillside, well, the municipality into a Turnagain arm block, possibly Eagle River, the hillside in Anchorage, and so on. And then let's look at a lot of these specifics and come up with, and this is where the community councils and some of our fire experts, like the captains that have retired from Anchorage Fire Department, that have 30 or 40 years of knowledge on where they think some of these bad places are, and focus in on doing some of these egress improvements. So the other thing was, we had a really unique year in 2019, and I was really lucky to do a talk show with Rick Toman about the effects that year. But I don't know if anybody is aware, but there's another indice that you didn't mention, Jen, but it's our drought code. And the drought code that year was off the charts. And what that did to us was we were in and out of these really extreme fire conditions that entire summer, and it didn't end until late August. And in my 40 years of history in the Anchorage area, that's a first. And we look back in recorded weather obs, going clear back to 1915. And we couldn't find anything that was even close to that year. So, you know, I put Rick on the spot. I said, hey, is this we gonna see more of this? And his answer was yes. The atmospheric river that formed and was a persistent weather feature and pumped all that moisture around the Alaska range and into the interior. That season there, the interior's fire season was over by early in the season, like early July. And our fire season went on with a vengeance. And we could have had a real bad outcome that season. We almost did with the start we had on the hillside there behind Service High School and some other ignitions. So anyway, I'd like to talk to you more about this, and I don't want to take up any more time, but it's very interesting. But I hope everyone's taking note that we need to update these CWPPs and get the specifics mapped out here, what we need to do. Because that's why Funny River succeeded in that 2014 Funny River fire. That's the only reason they really came out smelling like a rose, and it was incredible. 2 years before that, 2012, we developed the CWPP for that community, and everyone in that community participated, and that's what made it a success. Thanks.
Well, I mean, maybe these maps here can be a stimulus for getting people interested in getting CWPP plans going. I mean, my thought was if, you know, the Rabbit Creek or people from the hillside thought this was interesting, I could make, you know, presentations for the other community councils and go around and try and, you know, get the dialogue started. I like your idea of grouping it into areas. So I think that's good. Also, Rick Tolman is part of this project, and I do have some drought code information if you're interested, John. And I'm looking more into what's driving the changes, whether it's humidity, precip, or temperature, but we could talk about that.
Okay, cool.
Katie, I was going to say, how do we get this information out to the rest of the hillside? Do you have a version that you could do at our event on Saturday? And I will put you on our August meeting for the hillside or for Halo, and we'll have representatives of all the councils there, and we could get you into all of them if you're available.
Okay. I could attend a meeting in August for Halo. You know, one of the other things that I found is when I was just showing this before, I probably zoomed in too far because I found people want information, but you know, there's the fine line of giving too much information. When does information have more downsides than benefits? For example, you know, insurance companies get a hold of stuff and say, hey, I can identify this house, it's in a high risk area, and then, you know, people aren't happy, or, you know, neighbors are selling other neighbors, you know, you got to do your part. So that was kind of one thing I was testing out with this level of zooming in is this safe? Do people feel comfortable with it? You know, before I kind of say go off into Halo and start making maps and stuff like that. I don't know, Katie, what your thoughts are. If this is a good resolution to show things at.
I think it is, but let me hear from everybody else. I hadn't even thought of the negative aspects. John, you're good at that kind of stuff. Weddleton.
There's too many Johns in this room.
I have to find my mute button there. I assume, did you mean me or John Weddleton?
I was going to ask John Weddleton.
Good, okay.
Sorry, rephrase the question.
Well, the issue is, you know, when does information become more damaging than beneficial? So, you know, in earlier rounds with people I was testing it on, I kind of zoomed in too far, and you could kind of identify people's houses and you could say, oh, this person, we're going to up the insurance rates for this parcel because look at its wildfire exposure value, or this neighbors aren't doing a good job, they need to do better. So it's finding that balance of providing information without negative consequences, or minimizing the negative consequences.
We've had this discussion when we were doing the nitrates in well water study years back, maybe 10 years ago, with some worries that might happen. But, I wonder if insurance companies actually look that closely at these things. Are you aware that they do?
I do not know if they do. I've just heard people talk about the potential that they could do it. So I would rather, be shy and cautious and not create trouble.
I think looking at what you're showing us here, particularly kind of flipping back and forth and showing the changes and so on, is fairly enlightening at this level. And people can determine with their assessments where they stand as a home. So this is, I think, is very powerful as it is.
Okay.
Jen, as I was reflecting on this, because I knew this issue was out there, I was wondering, is it possible for you to show the information at the resolution you're using now without the actual home dots on there, so that people can see all the roads? And so from the roads, they can kind of figure out this is where I am, but they don't actually see their house or their neighbor's house. Because I think there's going to be a time and a place where that level of granular information might be useful. I'm not sure for this kind of discussion, individual homes need to be there, but I'm conflicted with that because I think it's really nice to see that there are real homes in there. But on the other hand, it makes it so you can pinpoint, that's my home kind of stuff. And yet with the roads, I think you have enough fidelity of information that somebody can identify which roads matter to them and where they are relative to that without actually seeing a dot meaning a structure there. I don't know if that's a layer option you have.
But Kai, I'm looking at this map and I see red around my house. And so I wanted addressed.
I guess, I put the houses on here, Kai, as I told you, because some of these roads, don't have structures on them. So it might not be as important to look at that, okay, this is in a red area, but no one lives out here, or like this one, no one's really out here based on this map. But however, there are lots of people along these roads. So, I'm thinking that at this resolution, we're okay. And, if people did want to look in closer, I could meet with them like Katie and let's look at it. But you also have to remember, this is a vegetation map that was created for a large portion of the Arctic. So it all needs to be ground truth to, make sure that it is correct. And that I still think we should get more accurate vegetation information with the Munis data that's coming, which could then be, this process could be run with that new vegetation information as part of CWPP plans in the future.
Okay. Others with questions that you'd like to throw at Jen about this information? Well, Jen, what are next steps for you? What work are you continuing to do because of the funding and the research program you have, and what could be done next if there was interest or support and potentially funding to support doing more? But what's happening now and going to happen? What could happen? Any thoughts on either of those?
Well, I'm looking at, some of the climate data to try to predict how wildfire hazards might change in the future. So I have those decadal maps that I'm going to be making. I would like to, try to engage with other community councils. If there is interest and we could come up with a plan as far as looking at these egress issues, I could try to find a student at UAA to do some digitizing and some work with the GIS. So we could talk about that. I guess the other big thing is I just got another large NSF award to look at fuel treatments in the Kenai area, Anchorage area, and interior Alaska. So it's with the Wiry program, which is from Colorado, and they do a lot of social wildfire research. So we are going to be looking at social acceptance of fuel treatments. as well as how to make them last longer. So a lot of vegetation work in fuel treatments that have been done on the Kenai and Anchorage to see, how do we do them where people will accept them and to make them more effective. And that's a new project that'll be starting in December, and it's going to be a 4-year project. And I could give a presentation on that coming up too.
Hi, this is Carmela from Hillside Community Council. Jen, may I ask, would you mind to load your contact information in the chat? I'd like to connect with you offline too after I talk with the board. I appreciate the offer to present this, and I'd like to chat with you.
Sure.
Hey, Jen, one other thought. We've always wrestled with identifying the wildland urban interface, really coming up with, boundary lines. And that's something I really feel like needs to be done so that we target the funds to the right areas. So, and I know Sue wrestled with that, Sue Rodman, when she was with the fire department. And so if you come up with any, I think some of this would help answer some of that question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are a couple of methods, a few methods, as you know, that have come out to identify the wildland urban interface. I've tried to write a couple of proposals to get funding to do that. But you could do something where we use this and we use the, the buildings and roads layers and maybe put some type of buffer around the existing infrastructure and try to pinpoint where the wildland urban interface is located.
Super. Well, Jen, thank you so much for taking the time to prepare the information and share it with us tonight. And it sounds like an offer to continue working on this down the road. I'm so impressed with this information and what it might allow us to do to continue the work that we've started here, as well as help guide the funding that's coming along, which will be significant.
And I guess lastly, I take a lot of the ideas that I hear from sitting in on these meetings and from John, and I do really try to write them into my research proposals so that, I can do research that is wanted. So like the WUI, I'm going to keep trying to go after money to try and identify a WUI boundary for Anchorage. So just let me know.
Wonderful, thank you. And for everyone who's looking at this, Jen's information is also in the contact lists that I've been sharing with the meeting minutes. And it sounds like also, the ability of all of us to share with Jen issues and needs and priorities not only helps her bring this kind of information to us, but it sounds like it helps her also guide what she can do and some of the applications she's making for grant funding to see how the communities need and benefit from this information. Okay, thanks again so much. Couple of quick wrap-up items as we try and close this meeting for tonight. I don't see AFD on the list here. Has anybody got anything from AFD in terms of Firewise program, woodlots, or Ready, Set, Go programs to update us on? I don't think so, but I'm putting it out there if there is someone here who knows what's going on there. Going once, going twice. Okay. On the issue of the state of Alaska funding that was in the budget with the help of Senator Revak, I know that money is being conveyed over to the municipality. Is there anything, Dirk, from Senator Revak's office or John Weddleton, either of you want to bring up as far as that $40,000 funding and the process or use of that funding?
Why don't I go first, and then Dirk, if you have some thoughts, go ahead and share them. But I had conversations with Brian Dean at AFD and Josh Durand at Parks and Rec today, and back and forth with email with Kai. Excuse me. And Brian said that with that money, it doesn't quite fit with what they're doing right now. It'd be better going to Parks and Rec, which is doing more hands-on wildfire mitigation now. And talking to Josh, he has a priority list, and he's got maps showing the different areas. I forwarded that to Kai, that maybe Kai could share. And within the hillside area that this 40,000 roughly would be directed to, there is the area far north bicentennial park near Hillside or Hilltop ski area. and also areas of Ruth Arcan Park are in their priorities. And that would be basically for mitigation. You know, the Assembly allocated $3.5 million for wildfire mitigation, but that's something that hasn't been specifically moved to Parks and Rec yet. And the mayor is looking at that for, you know, possibly setting up, you know, a navigation center for homeless. So that may not happen. So that makes, you know, 40,000 be the huge pot of money for the work that will be done. Josh was also open, though. He feels there's a real need to do a kind of broad survey of what needs to be done. I think Jen's work that she showed us today would be a huge component of that. And he expected that to be $200,000, but I kind of expect, looking at what Jen's done and other people have done, he may not be as aware of what's already been done. And that study could be done for less. And you know, this 40,000 could go towards that, because he really wants some way of directing ongoing funds to where they'll be the most efficient. And I don't think, I got a sense from him, he doesn't think like they really are set up for that now, aside from seeing every dead spruce tree as the next thing to fix, you know. So I think that's the state of the art right now, but they are looking for input on where that money should go. And it doesn't have to be Parks and Rec. I mean, now it would go to the municipality. And I think Kai had mentioned maybe it should go to some work EOC is doing. So the input from this group would be very valuable, I think, if you could consolidate some points and get them to, I think, to me, but also Josh. But I think ultimately it could, you know, could go to the city manager, Amy Domboski, and kind of discussions on where it would be targeted. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Dirk, anything you'd like to offer from Senator Rivak's office on this funding and the use of it?
Yeah, I got Assemblyman Weedleton's email later this afternoon and saw what his thoughts were on it. And I'm new to the Firewise program this year, so I don't know a lot surrounding it, and I don't know. I'll default to his judgment on that, as long as it's going to that, you know, that kind of that Firewise program is what we were trying to get it to. I don't know if the fire department, I thought the fire department had a program underneath them specifically for kind of what we're doing and educating. I don't know if some of that can go there or not, or how that works, but I think that the original intent was just mitigation. So if it's getting to mitigation, I think that's the biggest goal, but whatever the community council's thoughts are on it.
Yeah, and Dirk, you're looking very comfortable there. I'm envious. Sunny day. Brian Dean said that they are just doing assessments and the incentives for people to do the work. And it sounded like he's got the resources and the people set up for that. And another 40,000 would not fit neatly and within what they're doing. That was my sense.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. No, whatever you guys think, if that's, you know, getting to the goals that you guys are trying to achieve, that's the biggest thing for what we're trying to do this weekend and with that money.
I don't know about everyone else. For me, I really want to see it go into actual mitigation and not studies and other things that we've got. Jen, you got lots of money, right? I'd rather see trees gone, new roads planned, secondary accesses, all those things. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but for my, 2 cents on this, $40,000 in terms of the mitigation projects is nothing compared with the millions of dollars that are being allocated for that. What we don't have is money to get the community wildfire protection plan updated. We don't have money for any of these community events that we're doing for awareness. This is all bake sale funded activities that we're doing just on the good graces of volunteers. We don't have anybody stepping forward to move the Ready, Set, Go program communication out at this point in time. We don't have any funding to bring this data that Jen is developing out to the community councils to help them with work there. So we could dump this into cutting trees, and that would be good for the 10 or 20 square feet that would get treated. But it wouldn't help us identify which roads might be compromised by high risk vegetation along the roads. And it wouldn't help us make better decisions about how we'll spend the many millions of dollars that are coming along. So my 2 cents are this money, it's very small, it's very much appreciated. It needs to go into helping us make good decisions on how to use the big buckets of money that are coming, rather than just see it sucked up and disappear into cutting a couple trees.
Hi, that's very well said. And remember, the CWPP is how we compete for the big dollars, the grants that these wildland urban interface grants that we've used to assist homeowners in doing Firewise on their property.
Okay, well, it sounds like, John, a couple different perspectives on this. What kind of timeline are we looking at in terms of the money being received, transferred to somebody, decisions made on how this will be used? Is this something we need to keep on the front burner in the next few weeks? Is it something that we could percolate and have as a topic in an August meeting of this group to dive into in more detail? What's the process and the urgency or the timeline?
My sense is if you can let it percolate and have something in August, I suspect that could work. These things take a while to work through the system. And I would, I can contact Josh and Amy Domboski and let her know that that is what's being thought of. And I'll get their sense.
Okay, good.
I'll do that this evening.
Thank you so much for that work, and Dirk also for the work that's gone in to make this option available for us to ponder. Any further discussions or thoughts for John on this topic or the more general issue of funding for projects? Okay, good. Hearing none. Are there any other updates that anyone was hoping to provide tonight that we've overlooked before we wrap up for tonight?
Kai, I have one.
Go for it.
I talked with the state urban community forestry coordinator, Jim Rinkert, and there's going to be a 5-year anniversary of the McHugh Creek fire, or the McHugh fire, I guess. It left the creek out of the fire name, but they're doing a tree planting event a week from Saturday. So it's August 7th, I believe. Down at McHugh Creek, they're going to plant about 100 seedlings in the old burn. And he wanted me to kind of spread the word if there was anybody out there that was interested in doing something to reforestate a burned area like that. So,
And what is there a time on that event?
I'll find out more details here. He said he would share it with me when he found out.
Perfect. Yeah, with the details, I'll share it out to this full group.
Okay.
And the contact list we have.
After seeing Jen's map, I think we might want to request they plant shrubbery instead of spruce trees.
Yeah.
I was super compelled by realizing how good development can be such a significant mitigating factor. When I looked at what was going on in the maps in Golden View Park and Prominence Point, and realizing that development, the roads, the lawns, everything else makes a huge difference. And, as we and the community councils think in the future about developments and realize that developments can be a tool for some fire mitigation, risk reduction work, that was a huge aha for me in there, as well as her observation that longer term areas that have been developed can then grow back up to become new risks. There's something really important for us to realize what's going on in planning and the long-term picture. But the idea that development can actually be a process to help with that, those maps are really phenomenal. Okay, any other updates anyone wants to offer here? Going once? Twice? If we continue, I'd mentioned before with this group, it normally kind of wrapped up in June, but in light of the fire season not taking a break and the current issues going on, our next meeting will be scheduled as we have been on the fourth Mondays of the month. That would be August 23rd at 7 p.m. So I'll go ahead and plan on assuming that that will be the time for our next meeting. It probably will need to be Zoom again because of the way the world is these days. But we'll be able at that meeting, we can come back to this issue of some of the funding decisions or at least recommendations on that. We can also take some assessment of what has happened with the event that we do next weekend and any other project opportunities that are out there. Again, as final wrap up, anyone and everyone who can do anything using your lists and your contacts to help promote the event on the 31st from 11 to 2, please do. You should have a copy of the flyer out there in the emails I've sent. If anyone needs information, let me or Katie know. Good. Katie and John in particular, thanks so much for the work you're doing to organize the event, and everyone else is at part. Jen, thank you so much for sticking it out tonight to share the information that you're working on with us and what you're doing. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to be with us. Thank you so much. And we'll look forward to seeing most of you on Saturday. Have a good evening.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you, Guy.